Hi, everyone, and welcome to Let's Get Visible, a podcast for business owners helping them to grow, have a sustainable business, and get more visibility online. I'm Dawes Brown, and I'll be bringing you SEO and digital marketing tips, as well as interviews and conversations with other business owners. So, let's get started. So on the podcast today, I'm joined by Danielle Dobson. She is an author, speaker, and corporate coach on a mission to break the gender code, that code of beliefs we hold as a society that says women are carers and men are providers, and we are intrinsically different. Danielle's research into women in leadership found that the gender code underpins the inequality in our society today, particularly in the workplace. It's also revealed why mothers make great leaders and the valuable attributes they can bring into the workplace. Danielle works with organisations to help them unlock the potential of women on their teams and to attract the right female talent, creating more equality around leadership opportunities in the workplace. She also helps busy parents to understand how to get a better balance between life and work and to create more equality in both the workplace and the home. So let's welcome to the Let's Get Visible podcast, Danielle. Yay!
Oh, thank you. So great to be here.
Yes.
Thanks. It's brilliant. Thank you.
Wonderful and great to have you on the show today. Now, we do have quite a bit to discuss, and from that intro, I'd really like to start at the beginning of how code conversations began. So was this something that you had planned, or was it something that came out of a passion project?
Such a great question because, yes, it came out of a passion project, totally out of a passion project. I actually started off in terms of the business, my own business, with wellness coaching, or even before that, I was a personal trainer. And even before that, I was a CPA in corporate, working everything from multinationals and private practice across different countries for 10 years. And then when I took time out of the workplace to have my children, so my first child, had him in America, I decided I didn't want to go back into the corporate world. Like, it just didn't tick my meaning and purpose boxes. And so I was happily enjoying being a stay-at-home mum. I was in the privileged financial position to be able to do that. Not everyone is able to. And then, started the personal training just as an interest thing, and it was a hobby sort of business. And that's really when everything started to take me towards where I am today, because I enjoyed being part of the transformation process for my clients as a personal trainer, that they were making changes, that they were becoming healthier. One of my clients credits a lot of what we did together with helping her get pregnant after a fair few rounds of IVF. And they're making big changes in their life. But what I could see is that they were relying on me and coming to me like 3 times a week for that. So I want to understand, how can I try and help them to be me for themselves? So how can they take charge and an agency over their health and well-being? So that's when I became a wellness coach.
Okay.
And started working with, going beyond the PT stuff and working as a wellness coach. And then what I could see is these real challenges around women in particular valuing their well-being enough to invest in something like coaching or working with me.
Yeah.
So then I started working in corporate, because as a well-being coach, because when there's a good motivator, so something else you can tie in, so something to do with leadership or career or something of those measurable outcomes that we can tie in with our well-being, we're more likely to invest in it together, because there's another reason.
Yeah.
So I was working with women, professional women leaders, and I noticed that they were struggling with this tension between trying to make everything work well, feeling like they're doing well at work and then feeling well like they're doing well at home and in their relationships. And it was causing anxiety, burnout, stress, emotional disengagement, because there was so much pressure. And I felt it myself, like this tension around being the best mum I can be and being the best building my business.
Yeah.
And so then I started on this, I don't know, adventure of trying to understand. I'm really curious. I'm such a questioner. I've got to understand things. Everything's got to make sense. So I started interviewing women who lead in at work and also lead parents. And I wanted to understand, what was it about being a parent that influenced their leadership style, and being a leader influenced how they parented. So I wanted to work out what works well across both areas and
Yeah.
look at what strengths they bring and build in both. And so this took me on an adventure. I thought it was just going to be about 10 women, like as a market research project, and it expanded to hundreds of conversations and 52 people that I formally interviewed. And there's all these themes that emerged, which I talk about in my book, but one of the biggest was these stories and experiences and insights around gender disparity, pay inequality, and inappropriate treatment of women in the workplace, and how all of these disparities in treatment extended to unpaid work and the unequal distribution of unpaid labour in the home.
Yeah.
And it was like one of those things that, looking back throughout my whole life and working in engineering services, having two brothers, I played AFL football, I did all sorts of things to the gender stereotypes. I never saw all of this as an issue. I always thought that I determined my own destiny, that I'm the one who is in charge here. I didn't believe in quotas. You get out there and you do your thing.
Yeah.
But when you start hearing the stories of other people and you see that they're suffering, it sort of triggers something deep inside you, and you feel, well, I felt really compelled to do something about it, because the more I dug, the more I learned, and the more I listened to people, the madder I became about all these disparities.
Yeah.
So I, doing the questioner thing and the scientific thing, the journalist in me and the researcher, I'm like, right, where did all this come from? What, how did we get here? And I looked at evolutionary biology, I looked at anthropology and culture throughout time, and is it because men are stronger? What is it? Why do they seem to have the power? And then I discovered this gender code, this default set of beliefs that we buy into, that men are providers and women are carers, and that how all the structures that we have in our society embedded into our culture support that. I'm not judging it, wrong or right, but that's how we are. And so when I learned this, I was like, okay, I need to share this more. This needs to get out there, because I think this could really help women and men and families and workplaces. So that's when I thought, okay, one of the best ways to do it is to write a book.
Yeah.
So that's when I wrote the book. I am not a writer. Like, that's another thing. I was an accountant. I mean, I did do a lot of writing in my early years, and I was the editor of my uni magazine. So I was like, oh, this has got to be done. And so I had this avatar, Rebecca Fletcher. And every time that I felt like giving up, I thought about Rebecca. I thought, she needs this. I needed this book 5 years ago. And then I wrote the book, and then while I was writing the book, I'm like, actually, I can incorporate a lot of what I'm learning here, all these best practices from these amazing women, all of these experiences, and like a blueprint emerged from all the data and the research and everything else I'd done, throughout my career, and PT and wellness coaching and wellbeing executive coaching. It all came together. And so that's when I thought, actually, I can, take this to another level. So my previous business was DNA Energize, and then this one became Code Conversations, because a lot of this is around, there's the gender code, there's the parenting code, there's the corporate code, there's the business code, there's the community code, there's all these codes. And I'm planning on writing more, I don't know, maybe not books about it. So helping organisations, individuals, question the code, understand it, ask if it makes sense anymore, and then creating something different. So that's where it all came from. So it just slowly evolved over time, and I never really planned to be at call.
And it's such a common thing that pops up, particularly on the podcast interviews, is that each of us who are now running our own businesses really never planned to be in the position necessarily that we're in today, but it's through those life experiences, as you've mentioned, and also all of those transferable skills that we develop in those different roles. I had previously studied psychology and I really wanted to be a counselor. And then I completed my degree and went, absolutely not. I'm too much of an empath. I take on way too much emotion from other people. I'm not going to be able to serve them in this role because I just can't separate emotion from what I'm doing. So I moved into training and compliance work, but it was in the financial services sector, funnily enough. And then moved into broking and just all these different roles and different things that help shape obviously where I am today, but they certainly weren't necessarily chosen roles either. But it's just fascinating how what you learn, even in those different roles, are so transferable to your business today. And they do create almost like that structure or foundation for you to then build on that. And as your business evolves, as your businesses have evolved, you then create foundations and structures to help and support people with the work that you do. But I'd like to touch on your book, which is Breaking the Gender Code. And I'd like to read a little snippet from that, if that's okay. And it was the part, leaders are lonely. So I know women under pressure to do more with less, but I did not realize to what extent they suffer. Some women leaders are lonely and they feel their well-being is not a top priority to anyone around them. They are trying so hard to be everything to everybody and to be hyper responsible, and it's costing them. It's costing them in terms of their health, well-being, sense of values and contribution, and the opportunities to progress in their careers. And that one really hit me in the gut because throughout my working career, definitely health and well-being in my particular circumstance has suffered. I know that as a fact. And just to sort of see those words, you know, on the page, and it just really resonated with your experience, as you said, in interviewing these other women. I was just wondering if you can expand on this point, a little bit further.
So what I noticed is, I guess this is the thing where women are setting everyone else around them up for success.
Yeah.
You know, and in particular women with leadership roles, businesses, because they're taking on all of what you said about being an empath. I reckon there's so many out there that are in these environments that are not necessarily suited to their natural gifts. Seeing everyone else around them up for success, being the glue that holds everyone and everything together when they're falling apart.
Yeah.
It's common. And I guess what I found is that there's some sections. So the people who will go along that path to exhaustion and depletion, or the chronic illness. That is something. So what I found in my research is men die quicker, but women get sicker. Women tend to get more of the chronic illness. And this is from a book by neuroscience scientists, the Women's Brain book. So taking on this load day after day after day, it takes a toll, and it's actually probably better if we fall in a heap or get exhausted, because then we can do something about it. But that burnout, that can cause lower levels of connection with everything that normally makes you feel good, withdrawal from your support networks, all of those things that actually we need to nourish us, to keep us going. And I think what I've found is, if we're looking for what works, the women that I spoke to who have a strong sense of, I'm going to use the word boundaries, and I know that's used a lot and it can be interpreted differently.
I've only just started using that word and implementing it. So I'm happy for you to talk about it.
Great. Because implementing boundaries is perfect. And maybe you can share some of how you got there. But what I find the step before that is understanding what's most important to you. So what's most important, and using that as an internal compass to build that self-knowledge data bank. It's beyond awareness. It's self-awareness and then the data bank, like knowing who you are, your strengths, your sense of worth, that your contribution matters, that your needs are important. All of that sort of groundwork, I feel, needs to be done so that you have the strength and the courage and the consistency to have the boundary discussions, first of all. So it's okay as a client that you come to me with all the work that you have that you want to get done, that there are time frames on it, and it's okay that we have discussions. What's not okay is when you expect me to do it and drop everything and deliver without any guidelines. You're starting with what's okay, and then what's not okay. And I got that from, I don't think it might have been Brene Brown in one of her books.
Yeah.
Dare to lead. And I've implemented it with one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had in my life with my ex-husband. And it works. It's really great. But what's important is to have all of that groundwork done first and build that foundation to have those boundary discussions. And when you've had the first one, it then becomes the baseline for the next ones. So it's having the first one can be so tough. That can be tough. And then bringing all your strengths to it beyond that. So if you have a strength of, consistency and routine, so making sure you build that into there. If you have a strength around creativity, so using your creative approaches of how to do it better and differently next time. But you can bring your strengths to that new practice, or think of it as building a new habit, whatever resonates with you, because some people don't like routine habits. So whatever resonates, but the important thing is to keep having that boundary discussion, and then it reinforces that belief that you're worth it, that your contribution matters in everything you do, and that it is okay to have those boundaries. And then you can build a different relationship, a more equal and respectful relationship with various people.
Absolutely. And I love that. And you're right. It's the first conversation. It's the first time when you're setting those boundaries, because you're still sometimes second guessing as well yourself. And you think, am I being mean? Am I being nasty? Am I being selfish? And you question all of these things, but you feel so much more empowered when you do have that first conversation. And I think it's that self-realization moment as well, where you go, yeah, I'm not here just to, as you were saying before, make everything perfect for everyone else, while I'm taking the back seat in each of these situations all the time, and my health is suffering. Or, as you said, people expecting you just to drop everything because they have something that needs to get done, but it's really setting you up for failure, really. And there's no win-win situation out of that, because I think you start to build almost a resentment, and you start to question, well, are they valuing you as a person and what you bring to the table, or are you actually being taken advantage of? And that's something that's popped up, quite a bit, is that people mistake Wonder Woman type people who do it all and look like they have it all, in thinking that, yeah, well, we can just take what we need from this, and it's not okay, really. At the end of the day, it's really not okay. So yeah, boundaries is a really big one. And when working with your clients to develop these boundaries, are there any specific things that you can share to help other people who are listening right now to the podcast, who might be struggling with the same thing and thinking they need to be available at all times and saying yes to everything? What are some ways that they can create some healthy boundaries that really does provide that balance between, their health, their well-being, but still being able to deliver on things that, work things or things that they need to do?
Great question. And there's a lot of different ways you can go about it depending on individual context, so where people are at. I would say the what I always start with anything, with any kind of challenges, is what's most important to you. And sometimes that can take work. So you just mentioned then about balancing, other people's needs and your own well-being and work. So as an example, if you feel that well-being is really important to you, that it's one of your core values, that it's right at the heart of what you do, then accepting that that's an important first step. But then making every decision based on that, so that your health and well-being is, I'm not going to say number one, because a lot of women struggle with anything about themselves being number one. It's hard to just, get your head around that. So if we just say that your health and well-being is the most important thing, and it's important because other people are relying on you to be healthy. So, because this is my big one, if I go down, we all go down. So that's why I keep that in mind to prioritize health and well-being. So if that's really important to you, then put it right at the center of everything you do, like an internal compass, and make decisions from that place of health and well-being. And that's going to be executed differently for everyone. But make it, or just say growth is the thing that's most important to you, and put that at the center and make all the decisions around it. Maybe it's connection, maybe it's freedom, maybe it's accomplishment in your career, whatever it is, put that at the center and make the decisions from that, so that when you're having your boundary discussions, you can be saying, is this coming from my internal compass, or am I being externally influenced? Is it because of what I truly believe is important, or is it what I think other people around me or externally to myself think's important for me to do? So I think with any of these tough things, I think it's important to start there. And then specifically with boundaries, it's like what you said, it's exposure therapy. It's just starting, it's just doing it. You might not get it right the first time, but it'll be a pathway, a building block to the next conversation. And I'm not going to sit here and say it's not hard, because it is hard. So talk in reference to that conversation that I had. I was in this place where it's like, if I have this conversation, then things could go really, really bad. Like, I was just thinking the worst case scenario, and I was thinking, nothing will happen at all. And what I wasn't thinking about is any other points along that continuum. So things that I hadn't, the conversation could have gone in a way that I hadn't thought of yet. So I think sometimes we just can sometimes think worst case scenario without thinking that there are other ways that this conversation can go. And that takes a leap of faith. I know that because I've been there. And I guess also with this discussion too that I had within this conversation is I had my support people. So I had my current partner now and my coach at the time, the two Ps, Pam and Peter. So I had them in my corner, and that is important too, to have some, if it's a really big boundary discussion, to have a support person in your corner. So I think there's so many, other things, but I think those sort of two key things, what's important to you, or three things: exposure therapy, leap of faith, and support people. I think they're really key.
Yeah, totally agree. And we're in a situation where we're back in lockdown at the moment. We're both in New South Wales. And I mentioned in your bio as well that you also help busy parents understanding how to get a better balance between life and work. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing some of these boundary style conversations really showing up at the moment, because we're all trying to work either from home, or there's lots of things happening. So in the situation we're both in too, how are you finding being able to manage that in this type of circumstance, and what are some of the learnings that have come out of this?
Well, I think again with the boundaries, something even further on from boundaries is expectations and agreements. So rather than setting expectations, create agreements with everyone in your house. So my children are older. So I've got 3 boys, 10, 12, and 14. So this exact method isn't going to apply to people with really young children. But if they have a partner, they can have these discussions with partners. But rather than having all these expectations and which can also be mind reading for all of us, all these sort of unspoken expectations in our heads that everyone's supposed to do around us. It takes time, I will say, but having these conversations around creating agreements, right? So then rather than it being potentially going into arguments and meltdowns, you can come back to the agreement. Something like, I'm just going to make it simple. So with working, okay, can we all agree that we have our own time when the door's closed to my office, that means that I'm working and I'm not to be disturbed? Does everyone, agree with that? Can we all buy into that? If you get a yes, okay, so if you do come in during that time, then consequences will be X, Y, and Z. Like you won't have, my time later on, or whatever the consequences are. If everyone agrees to that and becomes an agreement, everything is clear along the whole entire process. And then if the agreement is broken, so someone comes in, then it's not necessarily about the people then, it's about the strength of the agreement. So you go back to the agreement. Okay, so that didn't work. Let's have a look at why that didn't work. Maybe I need to put a sign on my door because, the person forgot or whatever. How can we strengthen the agreement to make sure that this doesn't happen? Then it does not go into emotional stuff. It does not, well, everything is kind of emotional, but it doesn't go into character assassinating arguments, anything like that. So it's almost like taking a strategic and practical view to all of these things that we would do in the workplace and bringing that to home. And maybe some people aren't on board with that, but I find that is the best way to do it. There's one of me, 3 of them. And also something I'll say to them, like they'll come in and start rattling on and I'm working. And I say, right now, if you continue talking, I'll give you about 2% of my attention. Yeah. But if you wait till when I'm on a break, I'll give you 100%. I will be there. I will be present. I'll give you 100%. So what's it going to be? And then they make the choice.
Love it. Love it.
So I think being clear with agreements and expectations, boundaries, and then consequences of that not happening.
Yeah.
And having as much clarity around structure as possible. But the thing is, we're all different. I've got 3 kids who are very different. One loves a chart and a routine and a spreadsheet, just like me. The other 2 not. And then one in particular doesn't like any kind of routine. So I don't call it routine. I call it ritual. I call it a little practice. I call it something different because he doesn't respond to structure like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's understanding everyone in the house and how they operate too.
I love it. And I'm in a similar situation too. So I have a nearly 10-year-old and a nearly 15-year-old son. So 2 boys. Mm-hmm. And yeah, very, very different just in personality and what they work well with, what they don't work well with. And my door, is closed as we're recording this podcast at the moment. And yes, there are those agreements in place, but I think sometimes we assume that people know what those agreements are when they haven't been spoken about or discussed. So a really, really important point that you've raised there is to have that chat, have that discussion with them, let everyone know so everyone is on the same page. No one is guessing, therefore there's no expectation that people are mind reading and they automatically know what a closed door means. I mean, I've worked from home for nearly 10 years. And so my kids have been raised understanding that when mummy's in a call or she's in a meeting or her door's closed, it's almost part of just what they know. Whereas it would be more difficult for families where their parents have gone physically out of the home to go to work and then, come back home for dinner and all those kinds of things. But definitely speaking about it and having that clarity for everybody does reduce that emotional breakdown situations or meltdowns that sometimes do happen. As best as you try, they do sometimes happen. But yeah, definitely some great points there. Thank you. Now, hindsight is something that I talk about quite a bit during my podcast interviews, because there's lots of things, as we've discussed, happen through our lives, through our careers. They shape us into who we are today and where we are today. But looking back on your adventure, I'd like to call it, rather than a journey. I love the way that you've used that term. Is there anything that you would do differently in life or in business, and why?
It's a great question. And up until I did this research and wrote this book and the business, I would have said, no, everything's pretty cool. But since I wrote this, I would say one of the most important things that I would have tweaked, so I don't really have regrets or anything, because it's back to that, what's most important to me. And I led with that internal compass. But what I would tweak is keeping the career fire burning. So I was a stay-home parent for 6 years, and I did work for a not-for-profit for a bit of time then. But I think what happened is I've built skills and strengths, and I've actually got them on my LinkedIn profile of when I was at home, because you don't switch anything off. And I actually brought all my skills and strengths to parenting, to being a parent. But I didn't keep that career fire burning and keeping up with my connections in the business world. I stopped being a CPA. I just came clean. I said, look, I'm not going to be doing the CPD. I don't want to get a surprise audit. I'm checking out. I think so. Keeping up your skills and strengths, skills and expertise, that's what I would have done differently. And so I talk about this now when working with clients, to keep that career fire burning wherever you're at. So sometimes it's going to be a flicker, and sometimes it's going to be a furnace, and then something all the way in between. But the important thing is to just keep it burning. And I'm not saying I'm not saying it needs to be exact. So I spoke to a client recently in marketing, and she's decided to take a career pause having her first child. And she was going to just sort of check out. I said, just keep the contacts going, stay in the group, even if you're not going to be in marketing, at least keep that, all that you've worked for so many years and the career that you've built, keep that flicker, and you can leverage that. No matter where you take the next step, you can leverage from that. So that's my biggest hindsight tweak. And that's what I'd love to help people understand, women in particular.
Love it. And just touching on that. So again, just coming from personal circumstance and my situation. So when my first child was born, I had to go back financially to work within 4 months of him being born. And then with my second child, I went back to work when he was 8 months old. But the whole time, and this is something that I struggled with, so I don't feel like I was made to be a mum. And that might sound really strange, but I've always had this drive, this creative, drive, just something where my brain, would not stop ticking. And particularly when the second Bubs was born, when he was not sleeping well. So he would only sleep for 2 hours and literally be up all the time. And you would think that would slow me down, but instead I built my first website, and it's how I got into digital marketing. It was through being and becoming a mum for the second time that this life I have now is a result of that. One of the stumbling blocks or things that comes across my path is that I'm an all in or not at all kind of person. And so if I'm focusing on work, then I'm all in. I don't do anything. And I love the bit in your book, nothing is half-assed. If you're going to do it completely. Don't just half-ass something. And that's how I feel. I feel like when I give something focus, it gets 100% of my attention. But then if I'm, for example, focusing 100% on work, then what I'm doing is I'm not really being the best, parent or the best mum, or I'm not being the best version of myself health-wise either.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
just wondering, I'm really wanting to hear your thoughts about that and how your level or percentage of focus shifts and changes, and how to get a grasp of that without letting one of those balls that you've got juggling, dropping them and letting them fall down.
It's a really great question. And there's so much in there. And I think starting point, what I find is with the focus in the dropping the balls. So I guess I usually go into what does that mean? So I'll give you an example. A woman that I interviewed, senior HR director for a massive hospitality company, amazing, work ethic. She's got 2 young daughters, and she was feeling this tension, really bad tension between being the perfect mum and being the perfect HR director. And we dug down into it, and I said, okay, so what's your idea of the perfect HR director? And she's like, where you work really hard, you innovate, you work long hours, you get things done, you're dedicated to the job. Okay, what's your idea of the perfect mum? We have a job 9 till 3, where you can go to the gym, where you can get all the chores done, do the school run, and be calm. I said, okay, so that perfect mum, right? How does that fit in with your career aspirations? And she said, well, it doesn't really. I said, do you actually know anyone who's the perfect mum? She said, no. And so it was something that she'd created and cherry picked from all the best bits of everything she'd seen. And because for me, it sounded like Leave It to Beaver's mum, someone in the 1950s with the apron and give her husband the pipe and slippers when he gets home. And it was something that she'd created in her mind that was totally incongruent with who she is. And then also, so what was happening is this tension between who she was and how much she could give before she had children, like the level that she could contribute at. And it was associated with long hours. Now she couldn't do that. So she just actually felt, because she was a mum, she couldn't achieve at the same level of success she wanted before being a mum, because she saw it a lot around the hours she was giving rather than sort of like the quality of work, that she was giving. And so then she's caught in straddling these 2 worlds, creating all this tension. And at the heart of it was their own expectations about what these 2 roles look like. So my question always in that is, what is the idea of being the perfect mum or a good mum, or whatever words you like to use? What is the definition? What does that look like? What does being, successful in your career look like? Are they compatible? Are there high expectations or unrealistic expectations in either area? And then you mentioned too about your well-being. So looking at where your well-being, if your well-being is being fit in and around everything else, then it will eventually suffer. But then something that I see a lot in high achievers is that their well-being is actually enhanced by their work, because one of the strong pillars in terms of well-being is that sense of meaning and purpose. And I see all the time high achievers get their meaning and purpose and their drive from the work they do. So it's brilliant. And so I would say it's a matter of putting in some signposts along the way to check in on your health and well-being, or check in on where you're at. So before it gets to chronic or meltdown, but just understanding that the points along the way where it's getting to be too much, and you just need to pause, those sort of things. So that in terms of well-being. But I would actually say, we as a parent, we all choose we all show how we care in totally different ways. So some of your girlfriends might do certain things that for them to show how they care for their family, and you do something totally different, and that's totally okay. We
Yeah.
use all our internal and external resources, everything that we have to do the best we can in the moment, and we show how we care differently. So however you show you care for your family and you care for them is perfectly okay. And
Yeah,
that's the way
love
it's meant
it.
to be.
I mean, the way that I care for them is by not cooking because I'm a really bad
Yeah.
cook.
Love it.
So I let someone else do that bit, and that's the way that I show them. I want you to stay alive and thrive.
Yeah.
So I won't cook you any meals. But I love that. And I think it is, we have this expectation, and I love your Leave It to Beaver example there too. We look at other people and we start to do that comparison thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where we think, oh, look at that person. They must have the most perfect life. They're a great mum or a great dad. They've got a wonderful family. They're so close. They're this and that. But it's all perception, really.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all just making, again, those assumptions that we think we understand other people, but we're also not walking in their shoes. And yeah, everyone from the outside looks a certain way. And so we have this idea that they are a certain way based on what we've experienced and what our perception is. And I'll never forget, one of my managers when I worked at the agency said, Dawes, it really does depend on the side of the beach ball that you're holding, because the beach ball is multicolored. So it's got different rings of colors around it. And if we both catch that ball at the same time, and I'm holding the side that has the red color and you're holding the side that has, for example, the blue color, you're going to tell me the ball's blue, and I'm going to tell you that the ball is red. And it all stems from, the other experiences that we've had that have shaped our perceptions today. And then it's trying to not do that whole comparison thing where we think someone else is this perfect picture of health, work, family, all these things that make up who we are. But we really don't know at the end of the day. Everyone's leading a very sometimes different life behind closed doors as well. And what you see on the front is not necessarily what's truly going on.
Absolutely. And you're exactly right. We tend to cherry pick the best bits of all the amazing people in our life and create this unrealistic model. And I think it's such an important point about what we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Because of the work that I do and have been doing, and also involvement in the community and my kids' schools and speaking to so many people and parents. I mean, that's why I call code conversations, because I love talking to people. And for some reason, I don't know, people tend to, I don't know if they like it, but they open up to me fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And this is the whole thing. It's what seems perfect on the outside rarely is, or people don't often share how hard they've worked to get to where they are, or what support people and mechanisms they have in place to help them to get to where they are.
Yeah.
We often don't pay enough attention and give enough airtime to the process of being successful, or that perception of successful. And I think that's something we need to really change in order to help us understand more about other people and the importance of support and the importance of hard work and everyone else in the process.
I completely agree.
It's not an overnight thing.
No, and it's the iceberg. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I'm sure you have in your travels, but it's the iceberg image. It's popped up on social media quite a bit, but the amount of work that it takes is usually under the water, so under the surface of what you can see, and then it's just the top or the tip of the iceberg, which is the bits that we think, oh, look, they're doing great, it's so successful, but not realizing it's taken 5 years to get to that success, or it's taken, as you said, an army of people to help you get there. It's not always just what you're seeing on the surface, but there's so much that happens beneath that surface as well. But there's so many great points, and you've shared so many tips and strategies I'm sure that our audience can take away in both their business and in life as well. So thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. Now, if our audience would like to find out more about Danielle and her book, Breaking the Gender Code, you can head to codeconversations.com.au. I'll also be listing all of your links and handles to social media networks like LinkedIn as well. So I'll share all of those details, and then people can reach out to find out more about the work that you're doing, and also to get access to buying your book as well. So fantastic.
Excellent.
Thank you. Appreciate your insights, your valuable information, and for being a guest on the Let's Get Visible podcast today.
You're welcome. It's been brilliant. Love the chat. It's gone so quickly.
It has.
Thank you.
We could talk all day. Thanks, Danielle. Thanks for giving this show a listen, and don't forget to leave your feedback and rating. If you want to learn more about me or my services, please jump on over to letsgetvisible.com.au, where you'll find show notes and links to my social media profiles so you can connect there as well. Okay, well, that's a wrap for another episode. So I'll join you next time on the Let's Get Visible podcast.